In this video, I'm going to show you how to work the excess catastrophe practice reinsurance problem. Let's start by just reading the question. Datwin Blow Insurance Company writes property business in the Southeast. They have the following excess catastrophe structure in place. The treaties are effective 1/1 to 12/31, meaning they are one-year policies. So let me go ahead and map out how this treaty would look. And I think it's always important to do this whenever you're working one of these kinds of excess problems. So it says, first of all, that we have a $500,000 retention. That should be a K, and so we'll draw that, and that's at $500K. Then it says we have $2 million of coverage, so that would be up to $2.5 million, but it does say that it's times 95%. These percentage sharings or cost sharings in catastrophe layers of reinsurance are very common, keeping some of the skin in the game for the cedent, making them more incentivized not to write highly catastrophic business. The next layer, now the second layer, 95% of $2 million, excess of $2.5 million per occurrence. So this excess of $2.5 million is what we found here. And so we're just adding another layer of 2 million times 0.95 or 95% again. And so that will take us up to 4.5 million. The third layer, 95% of 3.5 million. This isn't exactly going to be to scale, times 95% or 0.95, which will take us up to 8 million. And then the last layer, which is not at all to scale, we ran out of room, but is 8 million, again, times 95%, which would take us up to 16 million. So I just like to always have that illustrated every time I have any kind of excess contract or program that has excess insurance, because it allows me to see where my losses will hit when they are run up through the program. All right, then it says each layer has one full reinstatement per contract year with additional premium calculated pro rata as to time and pro rata as to amount. Let's worry about the pro rata as to time and amount later. The maximum recoverable from reinsurers on any given layer is twice the given per occurrence limit of the layer, and that will also come later. So the first question, if Datwin Blow sustains a $7.1 million loss from a hurricane on July 1, how much of this loss would they recover from their excess catastrophe reinsurers by layer of coverage? So I'd like to go ahead and do this here in Excel. So we'll say this is number 1. We'll start with the first layer, second layer, third layer, and the fourth layer. The loss was 7.1 million. So let's run this loss through our graph here. So we have a $7.1 million loss. So it goes well into the third layer, but not into the fourth layer. So the first layer, it blows all the way through, as you can see my cursor highlighting here. So because of that, we use the entire $2 million layer, but the cedent only gets 95% of that. So I'm going to type in plus 2 million times 0.95. So I get a $1.9 million recovery. From the second layer, again, we have 2 million times 0.95. It uses the entire layer. So again, 2 million times 0.95. Now let's calculate the recovery from the third layer. So on this third layer, the loss went up most of the way through the layer, but not all the way. So we take 7.1 million, which is the loss, remember, and subtract the 4.5. And so let me do this here. So we have 7.1 million minus 4.5 to give us 2,600,000. But again, remember that we're only getting 95%, so we have to take that number and multiply it by 0.95. So our actual recovery is 2,470,000 from the third layer. The loss does not even go into the fourth layer, so we know that's just going to be 0. And that's the answer to the first question here. Now let's look at the second question. How much provisional additional premium would that wind blow have to pay reinsurers to reinstate the coverage that had been exhausted in A above? Remember that each layer has one full reinstatement per contract year, with additional premium calculated pro rata as to time and to amount. What pro rata as to time and amount means is that the cedent is charged the same premium as they were charged initially, but it'll be prorated for the amount of time that remains on the contract and the amount of the layer that was used. Or in other words, the percent of time left in the year and the percent of the layer that was used to reinstate only that portion of the layer. So let's go back to our problem. The first thing that we need to do then is to calculate the initial premium. And the way we do that is to multiply the rate here for each layer of coverage times the subject written premium, which is the premium that is actually subject to the contract. In other words, the premium that the cedent has collected that apply to the treaty. And so that's $9.5 million. So let's calculate the initial premium for each layer of coverage. And I put up here $9.5 million, and the rate is 0.05 for the first layer, 0.0414, which is 4.14% for the second layer, 0.0347 for the third layer, and 0.0210 for the fourth layer. Let me label these here. So to calculate the initial premium, I'm just going to take the rate times the subject written premium. And so that I can copy this down, I'll just make that constant. And there we have our initial premium for all four layers of coverage. So now we want to calculate the reinstatement premium. So the problem says that each additional premium is calculated pro rata as to time and pro rata as to amount. The $7.1 million loss from the hurricane occurred on July 1st, so that would be 6 months into the contract with a 1/1 to 12/31 contract period. So because 6 months has expired and there's still 6 months remaining in the contract, it's half. So we can assume that we multiply the initial premium by 50% to make it pro rata as to time. Pro rata as to amount means that we only charge for the portion of the reinsurance that we used. Well, in this first layer, we used 100% of the layer. So we simply multiply the initial premium times 0.5, which makes it pro rata as to time, the 50%, and then times 1 because we used the entire layer. In the second layer, again, we multiply the initial premium times 0.5. We use the entire layer, so we have to reinstate the whole layer 100%, so times 1. Now on the third layer, we only used a portion of that layer. So we know that we want the initial premium times 0.5 times the portion of the layer that we've used, which is simply going to be our $2,470,000 divided by 95% of 3.5 million. It's a bit difficult to read the way I wrote it, but let's do it down here so you can see it. So it's going to be our initial premium times 0.5, which is the pro rata as to time, times the percentage of the layer that we've used. So that is 2,470,000 divided by the layer, which is 0.95 times 3,500,000. And I'm going to add some parentheses here. And so that is our reinstatement premium, 122,441.4. We don't need to reinstate the fourth layer at all because we didn't use any of it. So that's 0. The next question is, assuming the dat wind blow insurance company's luck takes a turn for the worst and they sustain another loss of $9 million on September 30th as a result of a hurricane, how much loss will they recover from each layer of their catastrophe program? So let's go back to our chart. And we'll now run another loss through this same program. And this one is a 9 million. So it actually just goes 1 million into the fourth layer. So how much do they recover? So from the first layer, they again blow through the entire layer here. And we reinstated that whole layer. So it's going to be the exact same as it was the first time. I'm just going to put the initial recovery. Same with the second layer. But now keep in mind that we've actually blown through both of these layers now. And because it says the maximum recoverable from any reinsurers on a given layer is twice the given per occurrence limit, we've now used up twice the per occurrence limit, and we have no more coverage on the first and second layer. We'll come back to that. On the third layer, again, they blow through the entire amount. So the layer is 3.5 million here. So they recover 3.5 million times 0.95, or 3,325,000. For the fourth layer, they only go $1 million into the layer, right? Because it is 9 million minus the attachment point at 8 million. So I'll go ahead and write that out. And then we multiply that by 0.95. So they recover 950,000 from the fourth layer. That was part A. Part B, how much reinstatement premium would be payable for each layer? Well, for the first layer, we just said they blew through both the first and second layer. So the answer is 0 because they can't reinstate the layer, so there is no reinstatement premium. So now we need to calculate the reinstatement premium on the third layer. We reinstated a portion of the third layer last year, but we didn't use the entire layer with the first loss. So we can still reinstate the rest of that layer. The amount of the layer we can still reinstate is the amount that we did not use, which, let me make a note of what that was. Let's just draw it out first. So we'll come down here. The entire layer is 3.5 million. For the last loss, we used 2,470,000. But we first need to multiply that by 0.95, which gives us the actual amount of coverage that was available. Let's calculate it here. So that's 855,000. Let's also calculate the portion of that layer we had available. So that's 95% of 3,500,000, which is 3,325,000. Now let's look at how to calculate the third layer reinstatement premium. So we're going to do similar to what we had done before. We're going to multiply it by the initial premium for the third layer times. Now remember, we want to do this pro rata as to time and amount. So the time was September 30th, which means that it was at the end of the 9th month of the year. We have 3 months left. 3 out of 12 is 1/4, or 25%. So we'll just multiply this by 0.25. And then we'll multiply it by the percentage of the layer we need to reinstate, which is simply our 855, which is the remaining portion of the available layer, divided by 325, which is the total amount available in the layer. And that's 21,191. As far as the fourth layer, we're only reinstating 1/8 of the layer. Now we could multiply the 1 million and the 8 million by 0.95. But since we're doing it in the numerator and the denominator, we really don't need to. So again, we're going to use the fourth layer initial premium, and we're going to multiply that by 0.25, the remaining percentage of the year, and 1 million divided by 8 million, which gives us 6,234. Now we have to ask question C. If a third catastrophe occurred, how much coverage remains in each layer to cover the third occurrence? Well, we know we blew through the first and second layers, so that's 0 in both of those layers. As for the third layer, we already know that we have 855,000 remaining in the third layer. And in the fourth layer, we have 0.95 times the entire 8 million, because we reinstated that 1 million we used. So for a third catastrophe, we have the entire 8 million available. But multiplied by 0.95, that's 7,600,000. And that's how we do the excess catastrophe practice problem.